Commanders fans got the news they probably were expecting after Sunday's big win over the Carolina Panthers. That means Jayden Daniels, Dan Quinn says, is week to week with a rib injury. What exactly does that mean? What are the level of concerns here? Let's have a podcast. What up, everybody? It's JP Finley, Beltway Football, joined by the big man, Mr. Mitch Tischler, brought to you by MGM National Harbor. We love it over there. You should too. They are your home for game days for the Burgundy and Gold. All right, big man. Dan Quinn comes out, says he's somewhat forthright in a lot of ways. It's kind of what I expected. Very non-committal as to what the future is for Jayden. Says week to week, says they're hopeful that he plays against the Bears, but at the same time, they've got their procedure they're going to go through, and they won't leave any stone unturned. Um, I kind of thought this was going to be the plan. It honestly is oddly like right on par with you and I both saying we were about like 50% concerned, right? I don't think Dan
Exactly.
Quinn said this is not a long-term issue. I do think maybe 2 weeks could be a factor here as far as Jayden missing time. I think it helps that Mariota looks so good. I think let's see that against a team that isn't the Panthers with a bunch of injuries. But I'm not shocked. And I think more importantly, it's not particularly bad news.
Yeah, I mean, as far as coach speak goes, talking about injuries, this is the best case scenario. He easily could have been, less forthright and more kind of, out there in terms of giving you an actual update. I think you just have to look at the way that this team and this coaching staff and front office have handled injuries up until this point. You had Brandon Coleman and Andrew Wiley both get, touched up a little bit during training camp, and they ended up missing multiple weeks there, and they weren't
Mariota.
particularly quick. And then I was going to say Mariota as well, who they went and put on IR, even though it wasn't necessarily going to be a 4 week injury for him. So listen, I think that there, as much as everyone wants the immediacy and the instant gratification of seeing Caleb and Jayden on Sunday, I think you're seeing a coaching staff that is still keeping an eye towards where this team is going. And quite frankly, if Jayden isn't ready to go, you don't want him out there, because part of what makes him so successful is the dynamic play that he brings you, is his ability to run out of the pocket and do those different things. And if he's limited in terms of doing that, then that limits him as a quarterback, and it changes the offense. And quite frankly, it creates a domino effect with a lot of other outcomes.
Totally, man. Like if you are hurt and you start to try to overcome the injury, you overcompensate elsewhere and you hurt something else, that would happen to the entire offense, especially, I mean, Cliff's offense right now is kind of a symphony with like different times the horn section and the string section and the drum section, but it all has to work with kind of that, the it's not a maitre d'. What's the guy with the stick called?
The conductor,
The maestro.
the maestro.
Yeah. And Jayden's the best maestro they've got by a mile, but if he's not fully there, then you go to Mariota. I thought some interesting stuff from DQ where he was fairly honest. Is he called at one point he was like, "Yeah, when you get the core injury, you've just got to see all the movements." I'm reading now. When there's a core injury, it's more just the movements and all that goes into throwing and playing the position. So for him, going through the whole process will be an important one. Anytime it's with the core, it's with the movements. I think that's real because it's his left side, and we saw him grab at it enough that yeah, you throw with your right side, but to throw the way these guys do, you're turning your whole trunk, and everything is included. Certainly, every time he would run, or if he did run and take another hit on it, I think you know. Can they try to protect it and flak jackets and rib pads? You could try all that, but none of those stop a 240-pound dude's helmet from jamming right in there. You know what I mean? They might,
And he's wearing rib pads too. I
right?
mean,
He's already got them.
yeah.
Did find it interesting. DQ was asked, "Hey, you said rib injury. Like, what is it? Is it bruised? Is it broken? Is it cartilage?" And he's like, "Yeah, just let the fans know this isn't a long-term thing." That was the only real, like,
I will say, and maybe this is
particularly evasive approach, I thought.
my own reading on it, but he first called it a rib injury, which, to me connotates bone or something along those lines. And then later, when he started going towards core injury, that struck me as maybe more like a cartilage type thing on the inside there. But like you said, it's almost doesn't matter what the actual injury is if it's just a pain tolerance thing for him or a mobility impair will tell you whether he's going to be able to go on Sunday or not. And as much as, I and you and fans, we all want this, 1-2 matchup. I appreciate the fact that, that this coaching staff isn't singularly focused on on what's right in front of them, but also kind of the big picture ahead.
I think maybe to your point yesterday that I wasn't wild about and have slept on, like they coached 53 guys on this roster. And, Mariota did get that work, but then he didn't get much. Then he got hurt. Like it had been a while since Mariota really got snaps, and he got him yesterday. Um,
But one point you made yesterday too that I think is important is, when Mariota was ready to come back off of IR after, they were quick to
right away.
bring him back. They easily could have let the status quo go because you had, the Jayden Jeff Driscoll, quarterback duo there as your active guys. These guys clearly think highly of Marcus Mariota, and certainly I was loud and was during training camp and early in the season that I didn't think Mariota was really an NFL caliber quarterback anymore, just because what we saw wasn't particularly good during training camp / the preseason. You know, Carolina's defense is not good. Carolina stinks, but he can only do what you can do with what's in front of
Yeah,
you.
you
And
look good.
after missing those first three passes, I think he missed what, two more the rest of the day. He was nails. And so obviously seeing it against a Bears defense that's immensely better than the Panthers would be a different challenge. But at least you have an idea that you can do it.
Yeah. Um, Specific to the Mariota thing, I want to talk. I had a tweet early in the second quarter, I guess, when Mariota was in there and just missing everything and it just looked clunky. I was like, oh man, Mariota might not be the answer, whatever that was. And then I like addressed it later. I was like, after the ugly start, Mariota's lights out. And I just want to shout out all the Twitter experts that want to reply to the 1 out of 1,000 tweets on a game day. Um, Shout out to you. I hope you're really enjoying yourselves. Number two, apparently there was a problem with the podcast, the post-game podcast getting loaded to like we recorded it and it was on our software, but it didn't necessarily get pushed to Apple and Spotify correctly, which are by far where most people get their podcast from. That problem should be fixed. And if you want to, you could just watch the podcast on the app or on YouTube. And if you don't want to watch it, you could just put your phone in your pocket and listen to it. You don't have to look at your phone. You just listen. So
We
if
tweet
you
out
pick the
the
postgame pod, you're getting this. Like it's available. It's there. It exists.
we also tweet out the links, or at least we tweet out the links to the pod. It
Yeah,
tweets
direct to Art 19.
to
Right.
Art 19, which is where we post our podcast too. You can always listen to them there. Obviously, it's a lot easier for you guys if you're getting it on Spotify and Apple as normal, but there was a distribution issue
And
between
apparently it wasn't just us. It
different
was like a
groups.
thing.
Yeah. So hoping this podcast goes out easily, but if you're ever jonesing for one, check out Art 19, check out our Twitter feeds, X feeds, and we always tweet out the links.
Or just call Pete Haley. I once told everybody his cell phone number, so you can just call him direct.
It's
Um,
301-31.
all right. So 40A asked two questions, which I thought were interesting. Like when anything happens, there are people that want to find like the root or perhaps the problem involved. And I don't think there was one in this situation with Jayden getting the rib injury. And it doesn't sound like DQ did either. DQ was asked, will this impact the designed quarterback runs? And he was like, no, this was basically a scramble. He tried to cut it up to make it a house call and outrun the safety, which he has the ability to do. And then, it just kind of got jumbled up in there. I largely agree with that. I wouldn't change like that. If you're concerned about the quarterback design runs, you're concerned about the stuff that's in between the tackles. This was outside edge. This was not that. And I don't think they should slow that down. I think over time, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, I think there'll be a natural progression in how much Jayden runs. I just as we all get older, Mitch, I just don't think it's coming now. Um, I'm curious if you agree with that. The other question then was, is there a coaching point to make telling him to head to the sideline? And I think big picture, that point may exist, but I think specific to yesterday, he cut it in to try to score. And I don't want to dull that instinct, you and I have dulled a lot of our instincts over the years, Mitchell. I,
You
I
better
don't
believe it.
I don't want to dull any of Jaden's instincts.
Yeah, listen, there's a question, argument, discussion whether he cut inside or should have cut outside, and then he would have had the sideline to go out of bounds. When you have a superior athlete like Jayden, you want to hound into him, pound into his head, like, hey man, don't take extra hits. But to me, that you don't want to take away his ability to go 80 yards on a touchdown scamper. And quite frankly, when he took off on that run, I had real flashbacks to towards the same end zone as the RG3 76-yarder against the Vikings with electrifying. When he takes off and has open field, I feel like there's a chance that he can score every time, and there needs to be a balance between the big hit, the hits that he takes. I don't think that this was a big hit. I don't really have a problem with what happened. I think it's just kind of one of those
Kind of how he just
unfortunate
got curled
things.
up and rolled up, you know?
I also, as much as I question whether he's going to play next week against the Bears, I also question if this was the Ravens game and it's a 10-3 football game, does he go in there and get shot up and come back out and play? We don't know how big this injury is to really criticize what the play was. And I think if you're waiting for a major injury to criticize what he's doing, then you're doing it wrong. I think that he tried to score a touchdown and took a little bit of an unfortunate hit, but I don't want him to change that portion of play. Certainly, the next run when he kind of went to the edge and was face
Collapsed.
up, and then took like kind of an awkward.
I think he was clearly protecting himself because he realized how
Yeah,
bad his ribs hurt.
I think he pulled around the corner and was like, "Holy potatoes, my ribs hurt. I better get down."
You're
And
pushing
so
this holy potatoes. I like it.
it's my best way of not cursing, not using the regular 4-letter curse words that I use. So holy potatoes is taking its place.
I like it. I do legitimately like it. I think the first time we heard it was at MGM last week when Lazard
Yeah,
touchdown.
Lazard caught a
Um,
big touchdown pass.
the only if you want if you have a need to criticize something here, maybe it's that they called two more runs after that. There was the one where he went down, and then there was the one where they lost 3 yards. But that was kind of a scramble sack RPO thing anyway. And I think it's possible the sideline wasn't as aware as maybe like we were watching the broadcast and being on Twitter and all of that. Um, I I don't look at anything to blame here. I do wonder the week to week designation. I think this thing goes till Sunday. Maybe if they know he's out, it's Friday afternoon. But if they think he can go, I think it goes till Sunday game time decision. I'm curious what you think.
That's what I was going to say. I think we're going to talk to Marcus Mariota on Wednesday when it's
I do
time to
too.
quote unquote talk to the starting quarterback. I think we're going to get Mariota. I think they're going to be coy. I think that's the last direct answers that we get about this injury from this coaching staff until
You weren't
Sunday. And
exactly direct either.
uh, that was as direct as it's going to get, though.
Direct-ish. Yeah.
I think Wednesday when we ask Dan about like, hey, how's Jayden doing? We're working through it. We'll let you
Week
know
to
when we
week.
know.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
week to week. Yeah, we're gonna get some pretty short answers about it. So anyone expecting more clarity before Sunday, I don't know that we're gonna get it. I agree. I think it comes down to Sunday. Even if they know that he's out on Friday, there's no reason to tell the Bears that you know that he's out. Let the Bears continue to prepare for both quarterbacks, even though it's a similar offense with both of them. I think that we're not going to know anything until we see in the players that are active and inactive on Sunday.
You know what's really convenient is well, I wonder if they would want could I think they could name Hartman emergency quarterback, right? If
Yeah, they
that
get
would be Saturday night. Like,
right.
but you know what? It's really convenient when I had to tape a show at NBC on Wednesday and you and I had to tape a show on Thursday for Monumental is to not know what the hell is going to happen at quarterback till Sunday.
Correct.
That's what you call tap dancing, folks. Just wait and watch. Um,
To
but
be honest, I feel like I'm going to spend this week planning on it being preparing in my head and planning on it to be Mariota, and then being happily surprised if it does happen to be Daniels on Sunday.
I think that's correct. So I was going to say, are you more in the this is something that you saw coming, or the Commanders just dodged a bullet? Like I think this is just a freaky coincidence, and they dodged a bullet that it wasn't a knee that got twisted or a shoulder. and I do not see him going Sunday. Not reporting anything definitively, but Dorrance Armstrong just missed a game with ribs. Like I don't know. If you're week to week, to me that generally means you're missing at least a week. But the kid's a hyper competitor, and he might do everything possible to be out there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to turn this into a RG3-ish discussion because that was a different level of disagreement between medical coaching and player per se. But if Jayden can't go out there and operate the offense in his mind and in the coach's mind and in the doctor's minds, the way that we've seen the first 6 weeks of the season, 7 weeks of the season, then I don't want him to be out there. If he's not able to
I
run a
think
read
that's what
option,
DQ said.
yeah, and I think that's why you have to be realistic that most likely I don't think most likely it's not going to be Jayden on Sunday. I think you have to be prepared that this is going to be a Mariota versus Caleb Williams, and you get your number one pick versus number two pick matchup. They're just a decade apart.
Yeah. Um, I think that's the right place to land for now. Um, Brandon Coleman also in concussion protocol. DQ says they're not going to have to make any roster moves, which is interesting because they didn't even have to fill their whole inactive sheet the other day, which was
Right.
kind of funky.
That makes you because is there a spot?
They're
There's a spot open.
they've handled the Coleman Lucas thing very well, and it's going to pay off at least this week because you're not bringing somebody in that hadn't played. Like that's a bit of good news. But the Coleman,
Do they
I,
only have 52 active right now, or do they have a spot on the active roster right now?
I don't know. I'd have to count. They have a
I
bunch of guys.
believe. Yeah. Anyways, I'm wondering the thing you brought up about Sam Hartman, that move would tell you a lot if they bring
Well,
him up.
we should also be sure we understand that. Like, because it's 5:45. I have another hit at 6. Like,
Yeah.
I believe he would have to be at least announced as the emergency QB because on Sunday he wasn't dressed because they had, you know what I mean? Like Sunday they had
Right.
Eden and Mariota, and then Driscoll was inactive but listed as the third quarterback. And so Sunday they only had 5 inactives.
Right. What I'm saying, because Sam Hartman's on the practice squad and Jeff Driscoll is on the active roster,
Right. I think they would
you
have
have to
to
make a move.
elevate him
Exactly.
Saturday night. And maybe won't get that far. I don't know. But it's an interesting little wrinkle in this for the deep cut. Um Corey Kispert got a new deal, Mitch.
That's exciting. That's big.
Say it with your chest. All right, you want to bounce?
Sure.
What
I'm
is
actually
your
counting.
let's bounce
I'm in
on
the
you.
midst of, I'm in the midst of counting up roster spots. I
Okay.
believe there's one open roster spot that they could call up Sam Hartman with, but um, that's where I was.
Okay. I don't even if you do it Saturday night, I don't even think you have to count it.
Yeah,
If it's just a practice squad elevation.
yeah.
Last night your level of concern was 12 and a half out of 25. What is it now?
I'd say it's eight out of 25. I'd say
Which
it's
is less.
less than it was. I
Okay.
think,
Because you were worried about 4 to 6 weeks or 2 months.
yeah, I was worried about it being a longer thing, and Dan Quinn has been so coy about injuries so far, and to it wasn't a high level of detail that he gave, but he gave way more detail than I expected him to give in terms of what the injury was and what the time frame expectations were. So to me, it's a little bit less concerning because they didn't announce IR stint or a multi-week, being a 4 to 6 week injury or anything like that.
Fair. Um,
What about you?
yeah, I guess you're right. I think I'm kind of with you. Was I about the same 12 out of
I
10
think
and
we both were 12 and
12
a
out of
half.
25?
Yeah, down to 6 to 8 for me. 8, I'm fine with.
Yeah, you don't want it to linger. But at the same time, I do feel like organizationally, there's no push to do something stupid.
Yeah,
And I think there is organizational alignment that I screamed about forever, where ownership, GM, coach, even though Jayden's going to push like crazy that he wants to play, that the three of them will be like, hey, man, you got to sit another week. Like they just did it to B Rob, who was clearly not that thrilled about it, and running backs have the
Right.
same as quarterback.
And yeah, and I don't think you're going to see the organizational infighting that we've seen in years past. To your alignment point,
Agreed. All right, we'll be back probably Thursday afternoon, but maybe one before that. Who the heck knows? Thank you, big man. Thank you to MGM. And if you made it this far, I owe you a beer.